Hey, what's up guys? My name is Cameron Gallagher from We Are Film, and let's fix that slow computer. So let's get into it. Okay, so your computer is working slow, it's not working great, the editing is just dragging along, nothing's working, and it's time for you to buy a new computer. Well, don't buy a new computer just yet because I have a couple things I want to go over and a few ways that we might be able to fix that before you go ahead and buy a new computer. Now, obviously, if your computer is like more than maybe 5 years old, you probably want to buy a new one, but these are just some things that you want to take a look at before you buy those. You might save some money and end up in a better experience anyway. So again, these are some checklists to check off before you go and buy that new computer, or to see why maybe your computer is running slower than it should be. So the first one is hard drives. Hard drives might actually be killing your video editing speeds. Now, the reason being is, no matter what you're doing, it's going to be coming off of a hard drive. So if you're editing Blackmagic RAW, or you're editing Airy RAW, or you're editing H.264, all of those have to live on some type of hard drive. If you have a very slow hard drive, like a spinning disk, a traditional hard drive, that is going to cause a big problem for your video editor, because no matter how fast your computer is, it can only read those files at maybe 90 megabytes per second, or whatever your hard drive may be. And this is where checking your hard drive speeds and making sure that you have a very fast hard drive for whatever codec you're using is super important. Now, I would always recommend using an SSD when you can, but if you can't use an SSD, or you don't want to use an SSD, maybe you need a larger storage, you want to work with something called a RAID. So in my case, I work with 4 drives in a RAID 0. They're 4 fast drives, but then striped between the 4 of them, you get 4 times, in essence, the amount of speed, making them large drives, but super fast, and basically as fast as an SSD. So first things first, if you're experiencing slow video editing, check your hard drive speeds and make sure that they're running as fast as possible. And there's a ton of free software to check your hard drive speed, so just check online. Blackmagic makes some, but just look online for some hard drive speed tests and see which one is working for you. Okay, so you're past the hard drive's fine. Next, it's actually time to check the software. And this is huge because I'll tell you exactly what to do. I want you, if you're using Premiere Pro, if you're using Final Cut Pro, you're probably good. Final Cut Pro is really quick, but if you're using Premiere Pro, try this. Take some footage, open in Premiere Pro, edit your project. Then move it into DaVinci Resolve or Final Cut Pro if you can, jump in there and edit the same project, and I bet it's gonna be 10 times faster. That's because software like DaVinci Resolve and Final Cut Pro X are 10 times more optimized for hardware and hardware usage, so you actually may be underusing your computer because Premiere Pro is underusing your computer. So if you're using Premiere Pro, check the software first and try something different and see if that makes a better change or just works better for you, because a lot of times the software is what's holding you back. And I noticed this a couple years ago when I switched to DaVinci Resolve. Premiere was just really, really slow for me, so I switched to DaVinci Resolve and it was night and day. So that was a huge difference just for me alone. So check the software. Number 3, this is check the codecs. So what codecs are you actually editing? Are they H.264, ProRes? Are they DNX HD? Are they RAW? Are they some type of other codec maybe? You want to know why and what codecs you're using, because some of them are going to be much tougher to cut. So in particular, H.264 or some type of compressed file formats are a lot harder to cut on pretty much any machine. Even really high-end machines have trouble because the CPU is working incredibly hard to basically interpret all of that compressed footage. Because mind you, it's compressed, meaning the computer is having to do more. Something that's more uncompressed, or maybe that's more formatted to whatever software or computer you're using. For instance, if you're using a Mac and you're editing with ProRes in DaVinci Resolve or Final Cut Pro X, it is going to be blazing fast because top to bottom, ProRes works a lot better in Apple, of course in the Apple ecosystem because it's made by Apple, where something like Blackmagic RAW is going to cut much better in DaVinci Resolve. And again, you just want to make sure that the codec is as best as you can. Now, a way to get around this is by creating proxies, and I've talked about this in Premiere Pro, so I'll link the video in the description below, as well as DaVinci Resolve, new proxy workflow, again, link in the description below. But with those proxy workflows, you can change the codec and the resolution to be able to edit much faster. This is a great way to optimize your footage for your computer or software or whatever you may be using, and it should just flow much smoother in general. Now, if it doesn't, we're gonna go on to the next one. So first off, I want to make a huge shout out to Skillshare for sponsoring this episode. So if you don't know about Skillshare, it is basically a huge online community for creatives, by creatives, and it's just this giant melting pot for creatives to come together and learn more and experience new things, and maybe branch out outside of your comfort zone and try something new, or tap into those skills that you already have and progress those as you can. Skillshare has tons of online experiences from drawing to painting to business to filmmaking to photo and a ton more. I mean, literally the catalog that Skillshare has is insane, and I have not been able to even get through a piece of it in just a month because there's just so much you can do and there's so much you can look into. And that's a great thing about Skillshare, is that not only is there so much, but there's so much by actual working creatives. These are people out there doing this every day, knowing the hardships and knowing what it takes to actually be good in their field, whatever it may be, whether it's drawing or business or digital marketing. The fact that these are actual people out there doing this makes a huge, huge difference. It makes the Skillshare community something so different. I've been having a lot of fun dabbling into some of the business classes as well as some of the drawing classes because those are things for me that I'm not good at, so I kind of like to stretch out and try some new stuff and see what I can do. But at the same time, I like watching some of the filmmaking ones because it may be a different look at something that I never thought about or a different way to think about something that I haven't thought about. So we're super excited because the first 1,000 people to use the link in the description, that's right, the first 1,000 people are gonna get a free Skillshare premium membership. And then after that, it's like 10 bucks a month, so it's super cheap. So definitely get a hold of that. Check out the link down in the description below because it is 100% worth it. And I've been very excited to talk about this in general. I've been having a ton of fun on Skillshare. Again, it's just an awesome community. It's just a bunch of just smart people in one place at one time, and you can't beat that. So we'd love for you to join the Skillshare community with us and hop over there and see us. And a huge thank you to Skillshare as always for sponsoring this video. Okay, so now number 4, we're actually jumping into some computer assets, and the first one you want to check is your RAM. How much RAM do you have? Because before you go and buy a new computer, if you have like 8 gigabytes of RAM or even 16 gigabytes of RAM, you're at a disadvantage. Most video editing softwares need at least 16 gigabytes to run somewhat smoothly, but honestly, if you can have 32 or 64, that is much, much better. And I would probably recommend being in the 64 range or even closer to 128, because when you have DaVinci Resolve or Premiere Pro or Final Cut Pro open and then some other programs open, suddenly your RAM is split between all of them and you'd be surprised how quickly it can go. So definitely look into upgrading the RAM before you upgrade your computer. And lastly, this is one of the things only if you can do this, and this is adding an eGPU. So this takes a little more diagnosing because you have to know what's going on in your computer. Maybe you have a super fast CPU, an 8-core just monster CPU or 16-core monster CPU, you have 128 gigs of RAM, and for whatever reason your computer is still slow. Well, it might be your GPU. A perfect example of this is the MacBook Pros. So MacBook Pros have crazy CPUs, a ton of RAM now in them, I think up to like 64, I think in some, or even at least 32. So they have a lot of CPU and RAM power, but their GPUs are just physically harder to fit. Now granted, they're still pretty good, but that's gonna make a huge difference in the ability to video edit, especially in programs like DaVinci Resolve, which can really take advantage of a GPU. Now in my case, I actually use an external GPU, so this helps power my secondary monitor, but more than that, DaVinci Resolve can take advantage of that eGPU and offload a lot of the hard work onto that GPU. So the CPU and GPU are kind of splitting the work. That way it's not just the CPU, it's not just the GPU, it's a little bit of both. So if you have a slower GPU or maybe an older GPU, you might want to look into upgrading that first. But again, you want to do some more diagnostics to make sure that that's the problem and that you don't just upgrade your GPU and then you're kind of just, maybe it doesn't work. Whew. All right, so those are a couple different ways that you can kind of prolong buying a new computer and hopefully fix the slow video editing that you might be experiencing. Again, a lot of these are super simple tips and they're a lot more cost effective than going out and buying a new computer. I know everyone wants a new computer, so do I always do. But by most chances and most times, you're better off just looking at some of these on this list, going through, upgrading those first, and then seeing if maybe it's time for you to actually get a new computer. Now, I recommend not doing all of the upgrades and then having to buy a new computer, so try to be a little bit smart about it. But again, if your computer is only maybe 2-3 years old, it's probably one of these can fix it instead of having to buy a brand new computer. So anyway guys, thanks for watching. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and I'll catch you guys later.